Here's today's In Touch devotion.
Today's abridged scripture reading is from the first and second chapters of Job, where we find Satan standing before God, challenging the Lord's glowing assessment of Job's character, telling God that Job's righteousness was merely due to God's blessing on his life. The devil dared God, saying that Job would curse the Lord if he allowed disaster into Job's life. Verse 12. Then the Lord said to Satan, "Behold, all that he has is in your power. Only do not put forth your hand on him." So Satan departed from the presence of the Lord. Now on the day when his sons and his daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house, a messenger came to Job and said, "The oxen were plowing, and the donkeys feeding beside them. And the Sabaeans attacked and took them. They also slew the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you." While he was still speaking, another also came and said, "The fire of God fell from heaven and burned up the sheep and the servants and consumed them, and I alone have escaped to tell you." While he was still speaking, another also came and said, "The Chaldeans formed 3 bands, and made a raid on the camels and took them, and slew the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you." While he was still speaking, another also came and said, "Your sons and your daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house, and behold, a great wind came from across the wilderness and struck the 4 corners of the house, and it fell on the young people, and they died. And I alone have escaped to tell you." Then Job arose and tore his robe and shaved his head, and he fell to the ground and worshipped. He said, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return there. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." Through all this, Job did not sin, nor did he blame God. We then read in chapter 2 that when Satan again stood before God and heard God's commendation of Job's life, the devil dared God to allow Job to suffer personal harm. Verse 6. So the Lord said to Satan, "Behold, he is in your power, only spare his life." Then Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and smote Job with sore boils from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. And he took a potsherd to scrape himself while he was sitting among the ashes. Then his wife said to him, "Do you still hold fast your integrity? Curse God and die." But he said to her, "You speak as one of the foolish women speaks. Shall we indeed accept good from God and not accept adversity?" In all this, Job did not sin with his lips.
Imagine what it felt like to be in Job's shoes. Warriors, fire, and wind wiped out his fortune and killed his children. Then his body was so covered with boils that he scratched at the inflamed skin with broken pottery. Had Job not believed in the Lord's faithfulness, he probably would have taken his wife's advice to just curse God and die. Job was brought low, and he didn't know why, nor did he ever find out the reason. Thanks to Scripture, we are privy to the conversation between God and Satan, but the Lord didn't share those details with Job. Left in the dark, he had to decide if his faith in God's goodness would stand. Job decided to trust God in the midst of tragedy. He could have railed against the Lord, as his wife suggested. Or he might have followed his friend's advice and racked his brain for some unconfessed sin. But neither of those actions would have been fruitful. Instead, Job chose to view everything as part of the divine plan, acknowledging the Lord's right to do whatever he wanted for the glory of his name. Accepting the good that God sends our way is easy. The challenge for those of us who are believers is to receive tragedy with a willing attitude and a teachable spirit. Chance is not part of the equation. Nothing comes into our life except through the Lord's permission.